F.E.A.R 3 is a game that rarely sparks deep conversation. Usually it starts and ends with, wow, F.E.A.R 3 is so bad it killed the entire franchise. And that's it. Hey everyone, as always Jarek here, and I don't want to take that narrative into this video. Instead of asking how bad is F.E.A.R 3, I want to ask, is F.E.A.R 3 bad at all? That's the question we're going to be asking in this video. But first, I need to thank my sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare has become one of my favorite sponsors. It's a huge community of millions, all dedicated to learning or sharing their knowledge. There are near endless class topics to learn about: illustration, graphic design, photography, creative writing, animation, fine art, music, music production, film and video, marketing, so on and so forth. You get the idea. It really is curated just for learning, meaning there is no ads to take you out of the zone. Skillshare classes are of all skill levels and can be made into bite-sized chunks, making it easier to understand and learn that topic you're so interested in. Remember, practice makes perfect. However, burnout is terrifying. So that's why the class I'm sharing with you today is Productivity for Creatives. Build a System That Brings Out Your Best by Thomas Frank. Something I learned over the years of doing content creation is that your mental health is way more important than you realize. Burnout is very real. It's the difference between enjoying your job or having the feeling of, I really don't want to do this. If you don't manage your workflow wisely, you will start getting burnout. I myself have set my own schedule. As it turns out, weekends are healthy. Who knew? Anyway, this course tackles exactly that problem. It tells you how to maximize your time, but also keep yourself happy and enjoy the creation you're making. This is a very serious topic. If you're getting into content creation, I really would advise checking this out. So if you want to check out Skillshare, check that link down below in the video information. It is less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. And the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the video information will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. As always, a huge thanks goes to Skillshare. I really enjoy what they're doing. I guess let's start simple. The graphics. I say let's start simple because I really don't have much to say. F.E.A.R 3 came out in 2011, and it looks like a game that came out in 2011. This is more or less the same thing I had to say about F.E.A.R 2. It looked like a game that came out in 2009, which at the time was really disappointing because F.E.A.R 1 had some of the best lighting I had ever seen in a game. But by F.E.A.R 3, I didn't exactly have these expectations. Graphically, Crysis overcame F.E.A.R, and in 2011, we also saw Battlefield 3. I feel 2011 was a year where we saw a pseudo next-gen. We were still stuck on the 360 and PS3, but Battlefield 3 certainly felt next-gen, and if you played on PC, it basically was, because you didn't have those restrictions. Anyway, my point here is that F.E.A.R 3 really does not stand out graphically in any way. It doesn't stand out as looking really bad, but it also doesn't stand out as looking really good. What I can say is that at least the levels are pretty varied. You'll go from a prison to the sewers to the slums to the suburbs. There's a lot to look at, but unfortunately none of it really looks great. It just looks passable. That's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. What I can complain about though is the PC port has a few questionable things. For the most part, it runs perfectly fine and has plenty of settings, but there are 3 things omitted that I would really like to see. The first 2 are graphical settings that should be mandatory. 1. You can't turn off motion blur, and 2. There's no FOV slider. These actually aren't that big of a deal because it's really easy to change them in a config file. In fact, the config file is laid out in a way that basically gives you a tutorial on how to change them, so I don't know why they didn't just make them things in the game. Like for real, if all I have to do is remove a hashtag and click File Save to change something, why are these just not options in the game? Even more confusing is that raising the FOV doesn't start breaking things till about over 95, so that's more than enough to have an FOV slider. I mean, default FOV is 75, so 95 is a huge improvement. Those things are so easy to fix that I really can't complain about them, it's just really odd. What I can complain about though is that this game has horrible mouse acceleration. My aim probably looks terrible in this game, and that's because it is. I cannot aim with the aim acceleration in this game. I vividly remember feeling the same exact thing on launch and just opting to use a controller instead of a keyboard and mouse. It's that bad. Now this is the same problem that F.E.A.R 2 had, but someone made a raw mouse input fix. F.E.A.R 3 didn't get this fix. So if you were playing this with a mouse and keyboard, your aim is going to feel very off. It's really annoying, especially if you're trying to snipe. Sniping in this game feels really bad. It almost feels like it even speeds up as you're zooming in, then slows down once you've fully zoomed in. I don't know what they're doing with aiming here. Obviously, none of this matters if you're playing with a controller, but if I'm playing on PC and I'm playing a first-person shooter, I don't want to use a controller. Looking at you, you broken aim assist having ass Halo. Literally the only game I use a controller for because aim assist is so strong in Halo, you might as well just join them. So yeah, F.E.A.R 3's graphics. They exist. Story-wise, there is a lot to talk about. Let's say you're not exactly playing F.E.A.R 3 for the story. The presentation in F.E.A.R 3 is different than both F.E.A.R 1 and 2. In F.E.A.R 1 and 2, you had intervals, yes, but they weren't really separate levels. It worked much more like Half-Life, where once you got done loading, you continued right where you left off. In F.E.A.R 3, the intervals are separated by cutscenes and are more traditional video game levels. This isn't really a good or a bad thing. I mean, plenty of the best games of all time have done this, Halo for example. It's just something to point out because it's different from the first two games. It also is going to make the presentation quite a bit different. And I'll give it a little bit of praise here. The cutscenes in this game were directed by John Carpenter. Yes, that John Carpenter, the same one that directed The Thing. And I'll assume you've seen that movie, but if you haven't, seriously go watch it. It's one of the best movies of all time and the effects are still amazing to look at. You might be saying, what the hell are you going on about, Jared? Why tell me this? Everyone's seen that movie. You'd be surprised. I had 3 friends that didn't, so I got them in a call and forced them to watch it. Still a really good movie. Point being, John Carpenter is sort of a legend, and it has the results you think it would. The cutscenes have great camera work, transitions, and overall they are just nice to watch. Here's the thing. He only directed the cutscenes, he didn't write them. So there's only so much he had to work with. The story in this game is questionable. I don't think it's all bad like some people claim, but it certainly is weaker than the previous games. At the end of F.E.A.R 2, the main protagonist and Alma got it on against the best of the main protagonist's wishes, meaning that Alma is now pregnant. In F.E.A.R 3, Paxton Fettel comes back as a ghost, which leaves questions because he possessed someone at the end of F.E.A.R 2 Reborn. For real, I thought he had a body now, didn't he possess one of his replica soldiers? Guess not, he's just a ghost. Anyway, Paxton and Pointman team up to go find Alma. Also, yes, you're playing as Pointman as the main protagonist again in this game. The setup is just to make the co-op make sense. I'll talk about the co-op later. And to be honest, not much happens for most of the game. The first few chapters are mostly just a bunch of combat being tossed to you, which is fine. You also meet back up with Jin, who is apparently not dead because Extraction Point apparently is not canon. Fuck you, that is my canon, I'm sticking with it. Extraction Point is the true end of F.E.A.R. Also, Jin looks hideous in this game. What do they do to her? Her personality is totally different, the way she looks is totally different. You could have called her literally anything else and I wouldn't have noticed. Anywho, once you meet up with Jin, she tells you about Beckett. Pointman and Fettel would have known nothing about Beckett, so someone informing them about Beckett is interesting, but also, why did we have to meet up with Beckett? Like, it doesn't make any sense why we'd even need to go that way. Alma's already pregnant. Talking to the person that got her pregnant doesn't change that. Man, imagine if the world worked that way. Whoopsie, sorry, let me retroactively pull out. Once you get this information about Beckett, you spend the next few intervals trying to track him down, and once you do track him down, you kill him in that exact cutscene. What was the point of this? Having some closure for the main protagonist of F.E.A.R 2 is nice, but this is not quite it. Beckett at this point had totally lost his mind. Given the events that had unfolded, that makes a lot of sense. And in a way, I do actually find this fascinating. Not from a story standpoint, God no, that's pretty bad. The thing I find fascinating is that Beckett never had a voice in F.E.A.R 2. But he's fully voice acted for this one cutscene. It almost makes me question why they didn't get a voice actor for Pointman, because they show up Pointman's face now, so I don't really see the point of him being a silent protagonist. In F.E.A.R 1 and 2, you saw the whole game from a first-person perspective. In that case, it makes sense that the main protagonist wouldn't be speaking. That is supposed to be you in their role. But in this case, Pointman is just a character in the story with full cutscenes, so I'm not sure why they didn't have him talk. As for Beckett, the only explanation I can come up with for having this cutscene or needing to meet him is Fettel's own curiosity. Fettel possesses him and confirms that yes, he is in fact the father. Beckett explodes and then you move on. Like for real, we tracked Beckett down for 2 or 3 intervals just for this cutscene. Alright. From here we move on to something in the story that's genuinely interesting but not fully realized. Throughout the game we'd been seeing this demon creature thing of sorts. It's made very clear that Alma is afraid of this thing. Later on in the game, it becomes apparent that this is how Alma sees Harlan Wade. Harlan Wade was Alma's father and the person in control of the whole project. There's even a whole section in this abandoned house showing how Harlan Wade used to beat both Paxton and Pointman. Beat might be putting it lightly. The context is obviously very over the top because this experiment is sci-fi and really bad, but the concept is relatable enough to a lot of people in the world. Abusive parents are not as rare as you may think they are. You could have done quite a lot with this, but instead this creature just kind of shows up and you shoot it away as you're trying to continue the story. Seriously, you're just walking throughout this house seeing flashbacks, and between the flashbacks this thing just keeps bothering you. This creature even turns into a boss. You're effectively trying to get rid of those memories of Harlan Wade. This boss is not difficult, you just shoot the weak points a few times and then it dies. This is really disappointing because they could have done a lot with that setup. It is by far the most interesting thing in the game, but they didn't really utilize it. It's also interesting from the concept of fear. In F.E.A.R 1, he almost seemed not necessarily like a good guy, but the one that was doing the right steps. It almost felt like a father that had regret for his past actions. I mean, he was stupid and let Alma free, getting us into the situation to begin with, but there was this gray area where you didn't really know entirely what to think about him as a person. That gray area is very much so gone in F.E.A.R 3. And that's not exactly a bad thing because he was kind of messed up. It's just this didn't account to anything. Like, they could have done so much more here. Anyway, after this level, nothing happens till you get to the end of the game where you meet up with Alma. I don't know if I should show footage of this. I think YouTube may not like it very much. It looks a little gross. Part of F.E.A.R 3's co-op has a point system. Whatever player had the most amount of points, you get that ending. There's a good ending for Point Man and a bad ending for F.E.A.R. The thing is, the final result is kind of the same for both. If Point Man wins, he shoots him in the head in that same bolt hole he already has, which doesn't make any sense because he's a ghost and couldn't really get shot throughout the rest of the game, but okay. After he does this, Point Man takes the baby, Alma just kind of vanishes and dies, and that's the end of the game. If F.E.A.R wins, he possesses Point Man, takes the baby, and eats Alma for her power. The end result is that one of them is raising the kid and Alma dies either way. If the goal was to raise the kid, then why are they even arguing there to begin with? Maybe they could have argued about what to do with Alma, but she dies either way. For real, I don't really know what to say about the story. It doesn't make you think, and it's not necessarily written particularly well. I will give the game a bit of credit because some of the cutscenes were genuinely interesting. Not from anything new they written into the lore, but being able to actually see things that you only heard about in the previous games. For example, you heard about a synchronicity event where Alma reached out to F.E.A.R and F.E.A.R apparently killed a few people in F.E.A.R 1. This was past history in F.E.A.R 1, to clarify. You were just then hearing about it. Well, in F.E.A.R 3, you actually get to see this, which is genuinely interesting. It's just unfortunately not interesting the fact that they did anything new. It's just something that was already interesting about the first game that everybody already liked. At least we get to see it though. To be honest though, none of this really matters. You're not playing F.E.A.R 3 for the story, you're playing it for the gameplay. Honestly, that can be said about pretty much all the F.E.A.R games. F.E.A.R 1 had interesting lore and backstory, but the main thing you were playing the game for was the amazing combat and AI, and also a bit of the horror. Especially in Extraction Point. Which I guess we should probably talk about the horror in F.E.A.R 3. It doesn't exist. Occasionally, F.E.A.R 3 seemed like they were trying to build things up for some big scare, but then that scare never came. It just threw you right back into combat right away. They even tried to do the F.E.A.R 1 ladder scare, but a lot worse. The F.E.A.R 1 ladder scare is incredibly memorable to anyone, especially since they did it right at the beginning of the game, so you're afraid of ladders for the rest of the game. You immediately knew when you walked into that room something was up, the atmosphere was a bit off. That's not the case for F.E.A.R 3, it never did this. Once again, they could have done so much more with the whole Harlan Wade thing they had going on. Maybe even made a statement about abusive parents. Hey, the current story doesn't make me think at all. This could have made me think, but they didn't. The closest to being scary is you just have to swat away this demon-looking thing every once in a while. On top of all of that, this is a co-op game, so any chances of this maybe getting you scared are completely gone because you're your friend too much. And before you say anything, yes, this sounds a lot like Dead Space 3. And just like people that defend Dead Space 3, I'm going to defend F.E.A.R 3 here because the combat is really what holds the game up. That is the reason you're going to be playing the game, and it's honestly really fun. I know this is a sudden shift in tone, but I put a lot more time into F.E.A.R 3 than I had realized because I did genuinely enjoy the co-op. The first thing I noticed when I started playing F.E.A.R 3 is, holy shit, the movement's back! F.E.A.R 1, you didn't move incredibly quickly, but everything felt fluid. Going from spraying at a replica to jump kicking felt natural. In F.E.A.R 2, movement was slow, robotic, and melee just didn't work. None of that is true in F.E.A.R 3. Movement feels fairly natural, and melee, if anything, has been improved from F.E.A.R 1. Even the basic melee attack is a multi-swing, which is an improvement. Jump kicking has been drastically improved from F.E.A.R 2. Better yet, your momentum into that kick controls how far they go with that ragdoll. If you go from a full sprint into a jump kick, you are going to send that enemy flying, and it feels so satisfying. Not only does it feel satisfying, but it's just silly, it's fun. The same thing can be said for the slide kick. Slide kicking suddenly sends you Mach 5. You can even do it basically standing still. As long as you start sprinting just a little bit and then press melee, you're suddenly sliding 20 feet away. Melee is really effective, and it encourages you to do more than just sit behind cover. Now, I don't actually think that meleeing is more effective in F.E.A.R 3 than F.E.A.R 1. Given the context of those games, F.E.A.R 1's meleeing is a bit more effective. What I can say is that it's an evolution of that system. I should probably stop myself right away and point out something. F.E.A.R 3 was made for co-op in mind. If you're playing solo, you're gonna have a much worse time than if you're playing with a friend. The game does not scale depending on how many players there are. It was made for 2 people. You are going to get into certain situations with one person that is suddenly more difficult for seemingly no reason. But of course, that reason is because it was made for 2 different people. On top of that, if you're playing with a friend and one of you dies, you can just get revived by your other friend. You only fail if both of you die. If you're playing solo though, F.E.A.R isn't replaced with an NPC, it's just you, so if you die, you just die. This makes the gameplay drastically different. I played a few intervals alone, and I found myself mostly sitting behind cover actually using their cover system. Yes, there's a cover system and a regen health system in this game. It works fine, but in a F.E.A.R game, I don't really want to do that. Good news is, when I'm playing co-op, I basically never used it. Like I said, you have to play this one with a friend, otherwise you're just not going to have a good time. Let's talk about the gunplay. The guns feel significantly better than they did in F.E.A.R 2. They still don't feel as good or tear the environments apart like they did in F.E.A.R 1, but it's still an improvement. There's also not a huge roster of guns, but F.E.A.R never really had a huge roster, it just had guns that had a very specific purpose. You don't need to have 5 different guns that serve the same purpose, you just need one really good one that serves that purpose. The only gun that is pretty much pointless is the pistol, but that still serves a purpose for being able to shoot it while you go down waiting to be revived. Other than that, the rest all feel great. You have dual machine pistols, which feel awesome. You have a neat looking UMP, which is just kind of all around effective. You have a 3-round burst rifle, which looks like an assault rifle version of the Chris Vector. You have a rocket launcher, which is totally not the Halo rocket launcher in any way whatsoever. This one's actually kind of a downgrade because it only shoots 1 rocket instead of 3 like the one in F.E.A.R 1. Speaking of, that rocket launcher in F.E.A.R 1 is just a whack design. A tri-shot rocket launcher that's mag-fed. Why? I guess because it's fucking awesome. There's a laser weapon that you really don't get much. I wish I got a chance to use this more. The shotgun has this awesome, weird P90-like design where you cock it in front and it's semi-automatic, and it's a return to form. F.E.A.R 2 shotgun sucked, but F.E.A.R 3 shotgun is pretty good. It's not as good as the one in F.E.A.R 1, but I mean, aside from the Doom Super Shotgun, nothing is that good. Oh my god. You're just gone. And there's also the Penetrator Part 2. Yeah, the name of that gun still sounds like a porno. All of these guns feel like an improvement over F.E.A.R 2's weapons, but still not as good as F.E.A.R 1. With the exception of the Penetrator. I think that this gun actually got better across every F.E.A.R game. The Penetrator was really fun in F.E.A.R 1, then it felt great and sounded awesome in F.E.A.R 2, and in F.E.A.R 3, it just is even better. This thing sends bodies flying, and the fire coming out of the side, it just looks cool. The enemies themselves are varied. You have people that have their minds fried by Alma, so they more or less act like zombies. You have these demon dog-looking things. You have the usual Armacam and replica soldiers. They also have their mechs. Overall, there's just enough of an enemy variety and weapon variety for the game to be fun. The map designs, unfortunately, don't ever reach what F.E.A.R 1 did, but they're still better than what F.E.A.R 2 did. And just with the way the game is set up, being linear in this case isn't quite as bad of a thing as it was in F.E.A.R 2. There's one more thing about the gameplay, and that's when you get to play in these mechs. These are way better than they were in F.E.A.R 2. In F.E.A.R 2, the mechs were basically just amusing, easy breaks. There was no challenge to these. It was a change in pace. Instead of putting a puzzle there, they put a mech there. In F.E.A.R 3, these mechs felt way better to me. They even made the small, lighter mech actually feel different from the heavy mech, which is not how it worked in F.E.A.R 2. The small, lighter mech has grenade launcher cannons on their arms and a microwave beam out of the top. It's also faster. If you sprint with it, you do this neat, like, jet boost forward. But it obviously has less health than the big mech. The big mech works more like the mech in F.E.A.R 2. You have miniguns for arms, you got rocket launchers, and you move very slow. But you do have an extra shield to protect yourself. Overall, I thought these mech sections were more fleshed out instead of just being amusing breaks between combat. You didn't get to use them often though. You only got to use the small mech once and the large mech once. So just 2 times in the entire campaign, which only lasts 4 hours. Yeah, that's one of the downsides to this game. The campaign is pretty short. To make up for it though, once you beat the game, you have a chance to play as Paxton F.E.A.R. Or if you're the person not hosting the co-op lobby, you will play as Paxton F.E.A.R along with your friend playing Point Man. Paxton plays very differently. Paxton has a short burst he can shoot out of his hands, which doesn't do much damage. However, if you fill up your meter, you can lift someone in the air and then possess them, taking over whatever power that enemy would have. Armacam Soldier, this means you basically play just like Point Man. Possessing one of those brain-dead zombie things, then you can throw knives, hit them with wrenches. Pretty different stuff. The thing is, once that host dies, F.E.A.R doesn't die, he just kind of breaks free and then you go possess someone else, assuming your bar is full. This encourages a lot of extra aggression that Point Man can't do when playing solo, but when playing co-op, it evens out. He also can play a support role if he wants to. He can buff Point Man to give him some damage resistance. He can also do other things like picking up explosives. If you're close enough to an enemy, you can pick them up and even make them explode. Oh, also, Point Man still has his slow motion abilities. You may ask how this works in co-op. Well, the person controlling Point Man just has full control of slow motion. So if you're player 2, the game is going to randomly go slow motion all the time. It's sort of like when you're playing Killing Floor and all your teammates are going commando, so the game keeps going slow motion as you're trying to reload. It really is a totally different experience when you're playing as F.E.A.R compared to Point Man. That still wouldn't justify 4 hours, and that's not really where I spent most of my time. No, I had a lot of time put into F.E.A.R 3 because I was playing the co-op multiplayer modes, which were really fun. The main 2 I played were Contractions and F***ing Run. Yes, that's the name of that mode. Let's talk about that one first. In this mode, it kind of plays like the campaign in such a way that there's a linear path with enemies you need to kill and keep going. The thing is, there's a giant wall of death behind you and you cannot slow down. If even just one of your party gets into that wall, he dies and you fail. This adds a ton of tension to keep pushing forward. You cannot play slow and stick behind cover. You need to get to the next checkpoint. Oh shit.
I can't aim.
It's so close to us. That's right at the end, just run. It's a simple premise, but it's really enjoyable. However, where most of my time got put into the multiplayer co-op modes was with Contractions. This mode is more or less F.E.A.R 3 Zombies. However, I find it actually more fun than Call of Duty Zombies because there's a few things thrown in. And also, zombies as enemies that get more bullet spongy each round is just annoying and not fun. There's my hot take for the day. Anyway, this is a horde mode. Between each wave, you'll go out away from your base and find a yellow or red crate to bring back in, which gives you weapons. The red crate gives you heavier weapons, yellow crate gives you regular ones. You also are able to barricade certain windows. It's called Contractions because Alma is giving birth, and with each contraction, they give you a new wave of enemies. As that wave gets higher, the fog on the bottom floor starts raising, and it will hurt you if you stand in that fog. There's one little extra trick. Alma likes to mess with you a lot. She'll randomly show up on the map, and if you look at her or accidentally do damage to her, she'll do something along the lines of blinding you or outright killing you. On the very rare occasion, she'll randomly pop up in front of you so you can't avoid it. That's like those moments in Battlefield where you just have a whole team of medics and you just keep reviving. Oh, f*** Alma.
Oh.
She attacked you?
No, I'm blind. I can't see.
I'm trying to cover you. There's a suicider jumping up. Alright, you're good. Well, they fly out of the, like, side of the gun. But I don't see... Oh, Alma, why are you... I'm blind. As you can probably tell, this isn't winning any Game of the Year awards for multiplayer, but it's also a lot of good, mindless, time-wasting fun. This mode is where most of my time went into F.E.A.R 3. It's really enjoyable. The other 2 co-op modes have more of a competitive feel where they're multiplayer, but with gimmicks. I didn't really play them, so I can't talk on them much. I've heard other people talking about them, and they do really seem to enjoy them, as they're different than just team deathmatch or whatnot. But again, I haven't really played them or put time into it, so I don't want to give an opinion that I just don't really have. So I think that's it. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Let's go back to the question I asked at the beginning of this video. Is F.E.A.R 3 bad, actually? Well, I would argue no. Gameplay-wise, it's really fun. Story and horror isn't quite there like it was for F.E.A.R 1, but also I was way more disappointed by F.E.A.R 2 than F.E.A.R 3. I put way more time into F.E.A.R 3 as well. Gameplay-wise, it's just a step up in every way. When it comes to F.E.A.R 2, it brings nothing to the table. It does exactly what F.E.A.R 1 does, but it's worse in every imaginable way. So why would I bother? Why would I not just play the first game and never play F.E.A.R 2 again? F.E.A.R 3, however, feels entirely different. What it brings to the table is different than what F.E.A.R 2 and F.E.A.R 1 brings to the table. So I have a reason to play it. The problem is just that it's not a F.E.A.R game. That said, if I'm playing it for the combat, I'm fine with that. I'm never going to say it's a top 10 shooter of all time like I will with F.E.A.R 1. I'm not going to say it's a must-play that you have to go buy, but I will say if you want a good time waster, it's worth it. It genuinely is enjoyable, and I do like it as a game. And with that said, I think it's time to end this video. A big thanks to everyone that joined me over on Twitch. My Twitch is twitch.tv/Jarek4GamingDragon. If you subscribe on Twitch, you get to see my videos ahead of time. A big thanks goes to my sponsor, Skillshare. Check that link down below in the video information. It is less than $10 a month with an annual subscription, and the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click that link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. And as always, thank you for watching.